Ethical Perspectives on the News is produced by the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, which is solely responsible for its content. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of KCRG TV9.
Good morning and welcome to Ethical Perspectives on the News. My name is Alan Diehl. I will be the moderator for today's show. I currently serve on the board of the Interreligious Council of Lynn County, and I'm also the vice president of the Humanists of Lynn County. This morning we'll be discussing the Iowa public school system, both at a state level and also locally here in Cedar Rapids. Most people would agree that educating all of our children here in Iowa is one of the keys to building a thriving state in which young people are equipped to reach their fullest potential and maximize their contribution to society. That said, how to best do it in a rapidly changing world is a subject of much debate. To help us dig into this topic this morning, I have invited three guests. Good morning.
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 Excellent. If I could have each of you just take a few seconds and tell us your name and what you do and why the Iowa public school system is important to you. If you could just take a few seconds and do that.
Sure. I'm Noreen Bush, Associate Superintendent of Cedar Rapids Community School District, and education is the foundation for all, whether you consider the economy, whether you consider our future and careers for our state, but education is the foundation of where we're headed anywhere, really. Mm-hmm. So that's why it's important to me.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on. My name's Tammy Wawro. I'm the president of the Iowa State Education Association, and I'm a teacher on release from Cedar Rapids. So my heart is here in Cedar Rapids, but my heart is also across every zip code in this state, because that's where we have school buildings and children who want to learn, and often the school building is the place that they find the most structure, and the part of their time that's spent with us is so important. So of course public education is the heart of what I do.
Excellent. Thank you, Tammy.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Zack. Kucharski. I'm the executive editor of the Gazette. And at the Gazette, we care about strong communities, and education and learning is clearly paramount to that. It's the bedrock of a vibrant community, and so that's why we care.
Excellent. Well, I think we're going to have a good conversation this morning. I wanted to start out, though, with you, Tammy. You certainly have a unique view coming from the state, just statewide, what our public school systems, the condition that they're in currently. Could you talk just maybe a little bit about the health of the Iowa public school system, either from a financial perspective, just how they're performing? What are some things you can give our viewers this morning?
Well, you know what, the public school is on the state quarter, and we have made that a priority since Iowa became a state. I will say that within our schoolhouses and in our classrooms, our children are doing wonderful. They're doing amazing things with educators that care and support them. At a state level, our funding source for our schools come from basically the legislature, and the funding that we have given our schools, last year's funding was the third lowest since the inception of state supplemental aid, which was in the 1970s. So how we are funding and taking care of our schools at a statewide level is a big concern. We have the highest graduation rate in the nation, and we go back and forth from 1 and 2 for our ACT scores. So we are doing more with less, but that concerns me because the pressures that we're putting on our folks is very strong.
Yeah. And what is contributing to the decrease in funding, do you feel?
Well, I think we have had a lot of tax giveaways to corporations. So we have a pot, and our pot gets smaller. So I'm a 5th grade teacher. We have a pie, and we cut the pie up. And yes, the percentage of the pie that goes to public schools is a large part of what we do. But the pie itself is smaller and smaller. So logistically, you're not getting the same amount of money out to schools, and it is not keeping up with just even transportation costs, the bills that you have to pay. It is not there for us, and that's a problem.
Yeah.
In the context of the state is a stronger economy than where we were even 5
Right.
years ago. So
Right.
that is a great question as to why the decrease in funding to schools when really we're strengthening the economy of our state. And so prioritization of what is most essential. But there are other priorities within the state. We understand that. We're an agriculture state, right? And so we understand that there is so much of a pie, but we also understand our greatest investment is the children who will be serving as our future farmers,
Sure.
and our future educators, and our future economists, and our future business people, wherever that may be. But that is a great question that you ask, and I don't know if we could fundamentally answer the entire question. There's a lot of complexities within those
Sure.
decisions.
Well, the property tax revenues have been smaller than expected, and I think you hit the nail with the tax giveaways to the corporate piece, and
Yeah.
wrangling some of that and figuring out what makes sense is a huge issue, and I think that there's a lot of pressure and there's a lot of competing. In the condition of the state, and even the condition of the judiciary, there's competing interests all over the place, fighting for less money than
Right.
was expected.
It may mirror a national context too,
It
right?
does.
And Noreen, what impact have you seen here locally in Cedar Rapids due to some of this the funding restraints?
Well, absolutely. It has resulted in having to make really hard decisions, and I would say the bigger decisions happened several years ago. Fortunately for us, those decisions have impacted the way in which we've been able to use or manage our resources now in regards to our budget. But it affected people. And so we were able to absorb some decisions through really what we would call attrition. So some positions that are people who chose to retire, we were not able to necessarily replace some of those positions within the context of the entire story of the district. As a benefit, as a larger district, we are able to support more people, and so perhaps redistribute our resources, especially our human resources. But it certainly affected staffing. Is the greatest cost for a district are the people who work there, but it's also our greatest investment are the people who work there.
Definitely. Yeah, and I have 4 children that go to Franklin here in Cedar Rapids and Kenwood and Washington, right? And I've been just extremely pleased with the level of the quality of education they have received, right? So I definitely have a vested interest in seeing, in the future of the Cedar Rapids School District, and certainly at a state level as well. And we're going to get in a little bit more of that here later in the show. But Tammy, I wanted to go back to you and talk a little bit about. For those that have been paying attention, there's the Iowa School Report, I believe is the name of it, that has a ranking system that I believe that ranks each individual school per district, and it's out there. Anybody can go and view it at any time. In fact, in preparation for the show, I was kind of going through it and crunching some numbers and just seeing how the different districts compared to each other. But could you just talk a little bit about, one of the things I actually noticed when I went through it is that for the Cedar Rapids Community School District, for those that aren't familiar with the Iowa report, it again just ranks the different schools. For the Cedar Rapids School District, 42% of the schools were rated as priority or needs improvement, which did compare to 19% at the state level. And by comparison, a little larger school district, the Des Moines Independent School District, ranked at 63%. So just a little bit of how that works, but could you just give a little history of that? Some people may not be familiar with it, how you feel it does help, what those numbers mean, and again, how it helps improve the performance of each individual school.
Well, I appreciate bringing up because it truly is numbers, and behind every number is a story, and behind every ranking system is some sort of a story that we have to think about deeper than that number. So there are 9 indicators that the state has put in to look at how healthy your school is doing, and of those indicators, 5 of them are based on a standardized assessment that we have actually decided as a state doesn't work and isn't measuring what we're teaching. So 5 of 9 indicators are based on an assessment that doesn't tell us much. And at that point, we have to say, really, what do all these numbers tell us then? So what we have done is we had to put in a system that looks at other things. So of 9 indicators, 5 are based on an Iowa assessment that we're trying to find a new assessment for, and the other 4 are graduation rates, parent involvement, things that are softer than the 5 that are all based on one test, just looking at it in different ways. That's based upon the fact that No Child Left Behind had us ranking our schools based on one test score. We don't have to do that anymore, so we can think broader and we can think bigger. So I am hopeful that we find an assessment that's going to actually help us tell the story in a way that really tells you something. What you can do is you go in and talk to any teacher. They have other assessments. They have things that they know about your child that can tell you right where your child is. The 2 districts you've named off are the 2 largest districts in this state that have the very large ELL population, very transient, people moving in and out, very hard to follow some students. So there is a lot to that that I hope we just pump the brakes a little bit and look at it and say, what is this really telling us? Go talk to your teachers, go talk to the administrators in the building. They'll tell you how that building is doing and what they need to help with. They know what supports they need, and they're not afraid to say that.
Yeah, so I remember when I first got communication about what the actual ranking was for my particular school for one of my children, there was kind of this disclaimer that, let's not read too much into this,
Right.
And I think that was actually just a template email that applied whether they were ranked
Exactly.
high or low.
Absolutely.
It wasn't just like hedging yourself if your school was ranked low. But so on the one hand, I think I hear you saying that there's a lot of ways to assess the performance of the school, and this is just one of them. But on the other hand, is that system designed, though, to really drive change, or at least target schools that need to have some extra resources? Or is this just,
Well,
you know what I'm saying?
You're saying 2 different things.
Yeah.
I hope that now we start looking at this as where we can give supports and drive resources instead of naming and shaming schools, because that isn't helpful.
Yeah.
And it isn't telling a true story about what's happening there. We were based on a percentile ranking system like no other state. So the Iowa assessment ranks, there would be no way to be 100%. And
yeah.
after that, everybody gets shifted somewhere.
Yeah.
So I'm really hopeful that we will find an assessment that also became political. And our teachers don't even know what assessment they're going to use next year. And that has nothing to do with teaching to a test. It just has to do with how do we figure out how we measure what is success. And it would be great to have an assessment that helps us know how our kids are doing, how to help them get better, and have those honest conversations. And right now, I just don't think we have the assessment system put in place to do that at a state level.
And so, Noreen, for the Cedar Rapids School District, when you look at the report, the Iowa report, is there an action plan in place to address that? Could you talk maybe a little bit about it?
You bet. And I love what Tammy's highlighted here in that in our former practices and what assessments told us was a percentile rank. So if you take 100 students and they all take the same assessment, if you talk about proficiency, that would be a metric that would compare them to a standard, right? So if all students are proficient, then they're proficient. But that's not the intent of that assessment. It's you're proficient at one metric and you're proficient at the next metric, and then we sort in order first, second, third, fourth, fifth percentile, right? So in a standards-based environment, which is what research tells us is best practice. It has really fundamentally been in elementaries, especially Cedar Rapids community schools, elementary schools for a long time. We're shifting those practices in our secondary settings as well, which means we know what the Iowa core curriculum is. It is not an option. It is a mandate that all kids achieve the Iowa core curriculum, and that we report on those standards through a body of evidence that we collect. And those pieces of evidence are teacher created, aligned to the standards, and those assessments feed their practice every day. So we're looking from shifting from, schools were created in our environment, 100 years ago, being schools of isolated practice, and now we're looking at collaborative practice, and that teachers are engaging in assessments aligned to standards so that they can be better serve all of their kids together. And so that is the opportunity system that we create in a best practice assessment system. There is value in a standardized assessment to let us know at a dipstick how our kids are doing compared to others in the nation or wherever that may be. But our hope would be a balanced assessment system that shows us how our students are performing on the Iowa standards. And that would be best practice for us, which is one more piece of evidence for us.
Sure.
So I would say that we can see the report card as a piece of feedback for us to be able to reflect. And performance in Cedar Rapids schools has been uneven. And it is an opportunity for us to look at the causes of that uneven performance. But our teachers are working really hard to make sure that they have a best practice balanced assessment system to report on the Iowa core curriculum.
Interesting.
I would say that the storyline that you see, and particularly in the urban districts, it's the same storyline in several of the past systems. If you have a high transiency rate and you're not in school on a regular basis, it's harder to make a year's growth or to learn. Poverty is a key indicator too, and so those challenges that districts face, it's been the same storyline for probably 2 decades.
That's very true. If you look at the, as I spoke of the uneven distribution of performance throughout our district, we have some excellent indicators of our kids are performing at very high levels. And if you consider the ultimate, future ready component of our kids, look at our graduates and where they're heading and how they performed on the ACT as, as one performance piece. But we want to celebrate our diversity, and for kids who've been traditionally underserved through, as Tammy's highlighted, through multiple parts of the story of their lives, schools are the anchor for them, and we are the predictable factor in their lives, and we want to be able to have the best possible resources available and best schools available and excellent teachers available so that we can help our students who are traditionally underserved.
No, that's terrific. And you can tell you're passionate about it and you
Yeah,
care about
I got
it. Very
fired up.
knowledgeable.
I got fired up.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's terrific. And we're fortunate to have you here in the district. You had mentioned Future Ready. Could you talk maybe a little bit about the Future Ready Iowa outcomes, what that means, how it impacts school districts?
You bet, you bet. Future Ready Iowa, and I wish our director could be here for our state who so eloquently could speak about this. But Future Ready Iowa is really about forecasting what we need for career force by the year 2025. And so this isn't just a K-12 indicator for public education and any education. It's also an indicator for post-secondary settings, especially our community colleges and our colleges and universities, as well as workforce. And how are they preparing their current workforce for what's necessary. We have jobs that are predictable now that are going to be unpredictable where they're going in 10 years out from now due to technology, due to lots of progressions and innovations, and we're an innovative state. And so as things progress, Cedar Rapids and the history for being a manufacturing city, it's a rubber stamp for us, but advanced manufacturing and the technologies now within advanced manufacturing are so sophisticated. So schools 40, 50 years ago used to prepare students for what could be jobs that they would be very successful in leaving high school with high school diploma, or perhaps you were going to college. So it was an or system. You were going to be career ready or college ready. Now we're in an and system. You're going to be career ready and college ready. And so no child will be left without the opportunity to go to college if they so choose. But we have lots of opportunities, even within dual credit systems. We have kids today who are participating in the culinary arts program at Kirkwood Community College who are knocking out a lot of college credit before they even leave high school and maybe have a semester or two left to be certified chefs. And so those are the pieces of Future Ready Iowa that we have to think differently about how we're educating our kids.
Yeah, absolutely.
But also our employees.
Yeah, no, definitely. We talked about it just prior to the show about how just our educational system, we have to rethink it, right? I mean, just we have a rapidly changing world, as I mentioned, and you know, having our educational system adjust to that. And move away from what it was maybe 100 years ago when our environment was different is so important. I do want to move on a little bit to a local issue, but before we do that, Tammy, do you have anything you wanted to add from a state level?
Wouldn't it be wonderful if that was part of that school report card? I would love to look at a report card and see if does that high school offer
Multiple
pathways and dual credit? That isn't part of that report card story. Yeah. So I do want to keep thinking about the wonderful opportunities our schools have that we just aren't looking at it and making a big deal about. But it is a great big deal. That's wonderful.
It's huge. So kind of shifting, part of the Future Ready outcomes, Future Ready Iowa outcomes is this, for people that are local here to the Cedar Rapids School District, there is what's called the master plan, and that is kind of a redesign, reimagining of the of our school buildings, right? And there's been studies, preparation for the show, I researched of how, you know, a school building greatly impacts this performance of students, the performance of teachers, and we maybe underestimate the power of a good learning environment. So we have maybe 8 minutes or so left in the show, but could you take a few minutes, Noreen, talk a little bit about what the master plan is? And again, I know we're talking about Cedar Rapids here, but this could be applicable to any school district really of its size. But talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. We have a comprehensive strategic plan that focuses on 5 areas, and they're all, our vision is every learner future ready. And so that's each and every learner future ready. So it's future ready story, future ready learning, future ready workforce, future ready intercultural developmental mindset, and future ready facilities. So that facilities, master's facility plan is one of those strands of a future ready story. So this has been a comprehensive conversation going on in Cedar Rapids for a couple of years now, not just within the recent months. And so a task force was created to ask those big questions about what would be the best possibilities for our students and co-create opportunities with our children and with our families and with each other and the community to create what would be the best story for our kids. And also considering what Tammy highlighted earlier, with the resources that we know will be provided. And that is still a big question mark.
Right.
And so if we know, it's like, you know, as a family makes decisions, you know, you're living within a budget. Sure. Can you afford to keep living how you're living, or do you have to make some other decisions and live a little differently? And so as we could forecast the current state of our facilities, we knew there was going to be some costs to keep up with the buildings that we have, and that needed reinvestment or re-architectured, and I'm talking simple things that are not simple, but they're the functioning things: HVAC, plumbing, electricity, and making sure that we are meeting not just the minimum standards, but what would be the best learning optimal environments for our kids. And so as you described, we look at what the optimal environments are for kids. I spoke earlier about the collaboration that we're trying to encourage, which is best practice for our teachers. We have some buildings currently, especially in our elementary settings, where literally there's one teacher who teaches a particular grade. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3. But if we could create a collaborative environment where teachers could really harness their expertise with each other to serve our children, that's where the research came for the facilities committee, is to consider what are the optimal environments. So they gravitated towards an elementary focus and looking at buildings that were about a size of 600. That through the research and what the national scope looks like, that size of building could really help serve our students in Cedar Rapids.
Excellent. Yeah, and there's a lot of things that I've been attending, some of the different forums that have been hosted around the city, and just a lot of passion around it. You know, there's a lot of perspectives when it comes to historical preservation, when it comes to some of the emotional ties people may have to some of these older buildings, people that actually work in older buildings that maybe they feel they could be retrofitted and we don't have to necessarily build these new buildings. But Tammy, are you having to address this at a state level? Are you seeing this come up when it comes to some of our older buildings and having to make those decisions to either tear?
Yep.
Yeah,
So Cedar Rapids isn't alone
Yeah.
in trying to make these decisions. So I was over in Sioux City not that long ago. They've gone through the same conversations and are doing this, have rolled out this work. And from a teacher's perspective, I think about, and as a student and a parent, we used to have full-time specials in our school district. We used to be able to have an art, music, and PE teacher in every elementary school. In some cases, the PE teacher was the only male in the building. And now we have them driving different buildings because there is not enough capacity in one building to keep them there. And so it is a staffing issue. That is also an absolute funding issue too. So Cedar Rapids has funding issue upon capacity issue and people moving. Just like Sioux City has, Oskaloosa rebuilt and built a very large campus with the elementary school being the center of that campus. It has allowed them to bus into one closer area.
Iowa City spent several years figuring
at
out how to best handle that.
Yeah.
And just in the metro area too, you've seen it, Linn-Mar has made major investments, college communities made investments. And so, I mean, it's logical progression would be that Cedar Rapids would do this.
Yeah, and is there any, Tammy, is there any numbers out there that you can point to that show that the performance is improved for students that have access to more modern facilities? I mean, do you have data across the state that
So
discuss
you're
it?
going to need to go in and talk to those families and say, how does it feel? So performance can be so many different things. Is attendance there? Do community come and they're using the building for different purposes? In many places, you're bringing the community into this conversation. Once you're at the point to talk about what you want in this building and what it looks like, they've brought community members in at that point when they're ready to have those conversations. So attendance, health, there are many places where asthma really is an issue and where air quality is an issue. And those are all things we have to think about, as well as when you come into our community and you decide where you're going to buy a home. We have young families moving here and they want to look at a new building. I hate to say it, but I've seen that in many cases. And I think to say that something is better because of test scores, that isn't where we're at with this. As far as at our state level, it's what is best for kids in their whole general feeling of being in a building.
Exactly.
I think there's it's a tough discussion, and it takes a while to kind of have that, because in addition to just planning within the school district, I mean, you have to think about the community and how different education and what's being delivered in classrooms is today from when a school building was built. A school defines every neighborhood. It defines every community. And so there are a lot of different voices. You can see unique partnerships come to take shape. And so those conversations have to happen between the city and school districts. And those partnerships are kind of the foundation where you can take things and run farther with them.
And a building doesn't create the culture, it's the people within it. And the belief system and the values around that. And so usually when people are sharing memories, it's about the people, and they may have a memory that was thinking about the physical space, but those relationships that we establish in our in education that's the anchor.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, this has been a great show this morning. I appreciate all the expertise you all have brought. And certainly we have a lot of challenges ahead of us as a state, and again here in Cedar Rapids.
We do.
But I feel like we're in good hands. And again, thank you. And again, thank you to our viewers this morning. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care now.